I never thought our second wedding anniversary would end up like this. The day had started so perfectly, you know? I woke up early, feeling excited about the surprise I had planned for Daniel. We'd both been so busy lately, hardly seeing each other between his long hours at the law firm and my shifts at the hospital. But today was going to be different. Today was just for us. I remember standing in our little kitchen, the morning light streaming through the windows, as I started preparing our anniversary dinner. The house was quiet, save for the soft humming of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of birds outside. I wanted everything to be perfect. First things first, I headed to the local farmer's market just down the street. Old Mr. Johnson, who always saved the best produce for his regular customers, greeted me with a warm smile. "Big day today, Emily?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. I couldn't help but grin as I picked out some fresh vegetables and a bouquet of wildflowers. Back home, I spent hours in the kitchen, chopping, mixing, and sautéing. The aroma of herbs and spices filled the air, reminding me of our honeymoon in Italy. I was making Daniel's favorite dish, chicken piccata with a side of roasted vegetables. As I cooked, I couldn't help but reminisce about the past 2 years. Sure, it hadn't always been easy. We'd had our fair share of arguments and misunderstandings. Like the time Daniel forgot to tell me about his parents visiting, and I came home from a 12-hour shift to find them sitting in our living room. Or when I accidentally shrunk his favorite sweater in the wash. But we always managed to work through it, you know? That's what love is about, right? As the afternoon wore on, I set the table with our fine china, a wedding gift from Daniel's aunt. I carefully placed the candles, making sure they were just right. The soft glow they cast around the room made everything feel warm and intimate. I even put on some soft jazz, the kind Daniel and I danced to at our wedding. With dinner in the oven and everything else ready, I took a quick shower and slipped into the new dress I'd bought for the occasion. It was a deep blue, Daniel's favorite color on me. As I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my hair, I felt a flutter of excitement in my stomach. 2 years of marriage, and he still made me feel like a teenager with a crush. The sound of keys in the lock made my heart skip a beat. Daniel was home. I hurried to the living room, wanting to see his reaction. As he walked in, his eyes widened, taking in the scene before him. The candlelit table, the smell of dinner, the soft music playing in the background. "Emily," he breathed, a smile spreading across his face. "What's all this?" I couldn't help but laugh at his surprised expression. "Happy anniversary, honey," I said, walking over to give him a kiss. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me. "I can't believe you did all this," he murmured into my hair. And here I was, feeling guilty about working late again. We stood there for a moment, just holding each other. It felt so good to be in his arms, to feel the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. This was home, this was where I belonged. Finally, we pulled apart, and I led him to the table. "Come on," I said, grinning. "Let's eat before everything gets cold." As we settled at the table, laughter filled the room. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Daniel poured us each a glass of wine, the expensive bottle we'd been saving for a special occasion. "To us," he said, raising his glass. "To 2 years of love, laughter, and learning." We clinked our glasses, the sound ringing clear in the quiet room. As we ate, we reminisced about our first date, giggling over how nervous we both had been. Daniel confessed that he'd changed his shirt 3 times before picking me up, which made me admit that I'd spent an hour trying to decide what shoes to wear. "Remember our wedding day?" I asked, taking a sip of wine. "When your cousin accidentally knocked over the cake during the reception?" Daniel groaned, but he was smiling. How could I forget? Aunt Martha nearly had a heart attack. But it turned out okay in the end, I reminded him. Everyone pitched in to help clean up, and we ended up having cupcakes instead. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "That's what I love about you, Em. You always see the bright side of things." As we continued to talk and laugh, I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the wine. This was what I'd dreamed of when I said I do 2 years ago. A partnership, a friendship, a love that could weather any storm. Just as I was about to pour us more wine, the doorbell rang. The sound was jarring against the backdrop of soft music and laughter. Daniel raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "Who could that be at this hour?" he asked. I shrugged, standing to answer the door. "Maybe Mrs. Peterson from next door? You know how she likes to share her baking experiments." But when I opened the door, it wasn't our friendly neighbor with a plate of cookies. Instead, I found myself face to face with Claire, Daniel's mother. And she didn't look happy. Now, I should probably explain that my relationship with Claire has always been complicated. From the day Daniel introduced me as his girlfriend, she'd made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for her son. Too plain, too ordinary, not from the right kind of family. She'd always been polite enough, but there was always an undercurrent of disapproval in her interactions with me. "Claire," I said, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. "What are you doing here?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she pushed past me into the house, her face flushed and her voice elevated. "Where is my credit card?" she demanded, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting to find it lying on our coffee table. I blinked, confused. "Your credit card? I don't understand." Daniel appeared behind me, his expression a mixture of concern and annoyance. "Mom, what's going on?" Claire turned to face us both, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. "Don't play dumb, Emily. I know you took it. My card's been missing since this morning, and there have been several charges made at that boutique you like so much." I felt as if the ground had suddenly shifted beneath my feet. The warm, happy atmosphere of our anniversary celebration shattered like fragile glass, leaving behind a heavy silence filled with accusation and disbelief. As I stood there, trying to process what was happening, I couldn't help but think about how quickly things can change. One moment, you're laughing with the person you love, feeling on top of the world. The next, you're being accused of theft by your mother-in-law, watching as the trust in your husband's eyes begins to waver. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Our perfect evening, our anniversary celebration, was about to turn into something I never could have imagined. And as I looked from Claire's angry face to Daniel's confused one, I realized that the storm that was about to hit would test our love in ways I wasn't sure we were prepared for. The silence that followed Claire's accusation was deafening. I stood there, mouth agape, trying to process what was happening. The warm glow of our anniversary celebration had been extinguished, replaced by a cold, harsh reality that I couldn't quite grasp. I don't understand," I stammered, looking from Claire to Daniel. "I didn't take anything, I swear." Claire scoffed, her eyes narrowing as she glared at me. "Don't play innocent, Emily. I know you've always had expensive taste. Always trying to keep up with the Joneses, aren't you?" I felt a surge of anger at her words. Yes, I liked nice things sometimes, but I worked hard for everything I had. How dare she imply that I would steal? Daniel, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Mom, what exactly are you talking about? What makes you think Emily took your card?" Claire was quick to respond, brandishing her phone like a weapon. "I have proof," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Look at these transaction alerts. For identical purchases at that boutique Emily's always going on about. And guess what? My card has been missing since this morning." I watched as Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face. Is this true? Did you use her card?" The fact that he even had to ask sent a jolt of pain through my chest. "Of course not," I exclaimed, my voice rising. "Daniel, you know I wouldn't do something like that. How could you even think just give it back, Emily?" He cut me off, his voice suddenly cold. "Let's end this right now before it goes too far." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own husband, the man I had just been laughing and reminiscing with, was now accusing me of theft. The betrayal stung worse than any physical blow. "I didn't take anything," I repeated, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Why won't you believe me?" But Daniel's trust in me was visibly crumbling. He slammed his fist on the table, causing the wine glasses to rattle dangerously. "You're making a fool of me in front of my mother," he shouted. I flinched at his outburst, taking a step back. This wasn't the Daniel I knew. The Daniel I married was kind, understanding. He would never jump to conclusions like this. What was happening to us? Please, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Let's just calm down and talk about this rationally. There has to be some kind of mistake. But Claire wasn't interested in being rational. She stepped closer to me, her face flushed with anger. The only mistake here is thinking you could get away with this, she hissed. I've always known you were no good for my son. Now everyone can see it. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I had always suspected she didn't approve of me, but to hear her say it out loud, in front of Daniel, it was almost too much to bear. I turned to Daniel, desperately seeking some support, some sign that he was still on my side. But the look in his eyes was one I had never seen before, a mixture of anger, disappointment, and something that looked terrifyingly like hatred. Daniel, I whispered, reaching out to touch his arm. Please, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this. He jerked away from my touch as if it burned him. Do I? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Do I really know you, Emily? Because the woman I thought I knew wouldn't steal from my mother. Each word was like a knife to my heart. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. I refused to cry, refused to show any weakness in front of Claire. I didn't steal anything, I said again, my voice stronger this time. I don't know what happened to your card, Claire, but it wasn't me. And I can't believe that after 2 years of marriage, you'd take her word over mine, Daniel. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in Daniel's eyes. But then Claire spoke up again, her voice dripping with venom. Oh, please. Stop with the innocent act already. We all know what you're really like, Emily. A gold digger, plain and simple. Something inside me snapped at her words. All the pent-up frustration, all the times I had bit my tongue and smiled politely at her backhanded compliments and snide remarks, it all came rushing to the surface. How dare you, I said, my voice quivering with rage. How dare you come into my home, on my anniversary, and accuse me of being a thief and a gold digger? You don't know anything about me, Claire. You've never bothered to try. I turned to Daniel, my eyes blazing. And you? I thought we were partners. I thought we trusted each other. But the minute your mother makes an accusation, you're ready to believe the worst of me. What happened to for better or for worse? Daniel's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. For a moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of the man I loved, the man who had promised to stand by me no matter what. But then Claire laid a hand on his arm, and his expression hardened once more. Just tell us where the card is, Emily, he said, his voice weary. Let's get this over with. I felt as if I was trapped in some kind of nightmare. How had our perfect evening turned into this? How had 2 years of love and trust crumbled so quickly? I don't have the card, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've told you that. I don't know how else to prove it to you. Claire let out a harsh laugh. Oh, I'm sure you don't. You probably destroyed it after you finished your little shopping spree. I opened my mouth to retort, but Daniel cut me off. Enough, he said, rubbing his temples. This isn't getting us anywhere. He turned to me, his eyes cold. Emily, if you didn't take the card, then how do you explain the purchases? They were made at your favorite store. I felt a surge of frustration. It's not my favorite store, Daniel. I've been there maybe twice. And lots of people shop there. It doesn't prove anything. But I could see that my words were falling on deaf ears. Daniel and Claire had already made up their minds. In their eyes, I was guilty. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about a credit card. This was about trust, about loyalty. And in that moment, I realized that maybe I didn't know Daniel as well as I thought I did. Because the man I loved, the man I married, would never have doubted me like this. You know what? I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I don't need to stand here and defend myself. I've done nothing wrong, and I won't be treated like a criminal in my own home. I walked over to the coat rack, grabbing my jacket. Daniel's eyes widened as he realized what I was doing. Where are you going? He asked. Out, I replied simply. I need some air. And clearly, you two have a lot to discuss. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Claire's smug voice behind me. Running away won't solve anything, Emily. It only makes you look more guilty. I turned back, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm not running away, Claire. I'm choosing to remove myself from a toxic situation. Something I should have done a long time ago. With that, I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. As I walked down our quiet suburban street, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? I didn't know where I was going, or what I was going to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house for another minute. Not with Claire's accusations ringing in my ears, and not with the memory of Daniel's betrayal fresh in my mind. As I walked, I felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside me. Anger at Claire for her baseless accusations. Hurt at Daniel's quick dismissal of my innocence. And underneath it all, a deep, gnawing fear. Because if Daniel could doubt me so easily, if he could side with his mother over me without a second thought, what did that say about our marriage? I found myself at the local park, the same one where Daniel and I used to have picnics when we were dating. I sat down on a bench, the cool metal seeping through my thin dress. As I looked up at the stars, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of the end for us? Or was there still hope that we could find our way back to each other? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. I don't know how long I sat on that park bench, lost in my thoughts. The night air had turned chilly, and I shivered in my thin dress. Part of me wanted to stay there forever, avoid going back to face the mess that waited at home. But I knew I couldn't run away from my problems. With a heavy heart, I stood up and began the walk back to our house. As I approached our street, I saw that the lights were still on in our living room. My stomach churned with anxiety. What was waiting for me inside? More accusations? More betrayal? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was to come. I opened the front door quietly, half hoping that Claire had left and Daniel had gone to bed. But as soon as I stepped inside, I heard their voices coming from the kitchen. They were arguing in hushed tones, but I could still make out their words. "Can't believe you're defending her, Daniel," Claire was saying, her voice dripping with disappointment. "After everything she's done, we don't know that she's done anything, Mom," Daniel interrupted. My heart leapt at his words. Was he finally starting to believe me? I walked towards the kitchen, my footsteps alerting them to my presence. They both fell silent as I entered the room. Daniel was leaning against the counter, his tie loosened and his hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Claire sat at the table, her face set in a scowl. "Emily," Daniel said, his voice uncertain. "You're back." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. The tension in the room was palpable, like a rubber band stretched to its limit, ready to snap at any moment. "Where have you been?" Claire demanded, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Off hiding the evidence, I suppose?" I felt a surge of anger at her words. "I went for a walk," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I needed some air after being accused of theft in my own home. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, please. Let's not start this again." But Claire wasn't done. She stood up, pointing an accusing finger at me. "I want my credit card back, Emily. Now." I threw my hands up in exasperation. "For the last time, I don't have your card. I never did." "Liar," Claire shouted, her face flushing red with anger. "You've always been jealous of what we have. Always trying to get your hands on our money. That's enough." Daniel's voice cut through the air like a whip. We both turned to look at him, startled by his outburst. His face was a mask of fury, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he was going to defend me, to tell his mother to leave, to apologize for doubting me. But then he turned to me, his eyes blazing with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Just give it back, Emily," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Stop lying. Stop making this worse than it already is." I felt as if I'd been slapped. After everything, after 2 years of marriage, he still didn't believe me. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. "I'm not lying," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes despite my best efforts to hold them back. "Daniel, please. You know me. You know I wouldn't do this." But my words seemed to only fuel his anger. He took a step towards me, his face contorted with rage. "Do I?" he spat. "Do I really know you, Emily? Because the woman I thought I knew wouldn't steal from my mother. Wouldn't lie to my face." I backed away, fear creeping into my heart. I'd never seen Daniel like this before. His eyes were wild, his breathing heavy. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else entirely. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking. "You're scaring me. Please, let's just calm down and dash." I never got to finish that sentence. Because in that moment, Daniel lost control. His hand shot out, faster than I could react. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach as his fist connected, and then I was on the ground, gasping for air. The room fell silent, save for the sound of my strained breathing. I lay there, curled up on the cold kitchen tile, pain radiating through my body. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional agony I felt. My husband, the man I loved, had just hit me. I heard Claire's audible gasp, breaking the eerie silence. "Daniel," she murmured, her voice no longer accusing but uncertain. As the reality of what he'd done sank in, I saw the rage drain from Daniel's face, replaced by shock and horror. "Emily." He stammered, reaching out towards me. But I flinched away from his touch, using the kitchen counter to pull myself to my feet. I stood there, one arm wrapped protectively around my midsection, the other gripping the counter for support. I looked Daniel in the eye, my gaze steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "You just destroyed everything," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. Daniel's face crumpled. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." I don't know what came over me, but I wasn't listening anymore. I turned away from him, from both of them, and walked out of the kitchen. I could hear Daniel calling after me, his voice pleading, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my coat and my keys, ignoring the pain that shot through me with every movement. As I opened the front door, I heard footsteps behind me. "Emily, wait," Daniel called out. "Please, don't go. We can talk about this. We can fix this." I turned to look at him one last time. The man standing before me looked nothing like the Daniel I knew. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked lost, desperate. But all I could see was the man who had doubted me, who had chosen his mother over me, who had raised his hand against me. "There's nothing to fix," I said softly. "You broke us, Daniel. You broke everything we had." And with that, I walked out into the night, closing the door firmly behind me. I got into my car, my hands shaking as I put the key in the ignition. As I drove away from our house, from the life we had built together, I felt a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Fear, anger, sadness, and underneath it all, a sense of relief. Because even though I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I deserved better than this. I drove aimlessly for a while, not sure where to go. The events of the night kept replaying in my mind like a horrible movie I couldn't turn off. How had we gone from celebrating our anniversary to this? It seemed impossible that just a few hours ago, we had been laughing and reminiscing about our wedding day. Eventually, I found myself parked outside my best friend Sarah's apartment building. I hadn't consciously decided to come here, but now that I was here, I knew it was the right place to be. Sarah had been my rock through so many tough times. If anyone could help me make sense of this nightmare, it was her. I made my way up to her apartment, each step sending a jolt of pain through my body. When Sarah opened the door, her smile quickly turned to concern as she took in my tear-stained face and the way I was holding myself. "Emily," she said, her voice filled with worry. "What happened? Are you okay?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. Instead, a sob escaped my lips, and suddenly I was crying uncontrollably. Sarah pulled me into a gentle hug, careful not to hurt me, and led me inside. As I sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket and clutching a cup of tea, I told her everything. The anniversary dinner, Claire's accusations, Daniel's betrayal, and finally, the moment that had shattered my world completely. Sarah listened in shocked silence, her face a mixture of anger and sympathy. When I finished, she took my hand in hers. "Oh, Emily," she said softly. "I'm so sorry. What Daniel did, It's unforgivable. I nodded, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. I don't know what to do, Sarah, I whispered. I can't go back there. I can't be with someone who would do that to me. But, he's my husband. We've been through so much together. How did it all go so wrong? Sarah squeezed my hand. Listen to me, Em. What happened tonight is not your fault. Daniel made his choices. He chose to doubt you, to believe his mother over you, and worst of all, he chose to hurt you. You did nothing to deserve that. Her words were like a balm to my battered soul. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of strength returning. Sarah was right. I hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't deserve to be treated this way. You can stay here as long as you need, Sarah continued. We'll figure this out together, okay? You're not alone in this. As I lay on Sarah's couch that night, trying to sleep despite the turmoil in my mind, I realized that this was a turning point. The life I had known, the future I had planned with Daniel, it was all gone now. But maybe, just maybe, this ending could also be a new beginning. A chance to rediscover who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. I knew that. But for now, in the quiet of Sarah's apartment, I allowed myself to feel a tiny spark of hope. Whatever came next, I would face it. Because I was stronger than Daniel's betrayal, stronger than Claire's accusations, stronger than the pain that still throbbed in my body. I was Emily. And I would survive this. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My body ached, a constant reminder of last night's events. For a moment, as I blinked awake on Sarah's couch, I hoped it had all been a terrible nightmare. But the unfamiliar surroundings and the dull pain in my stomach quickly brought reality crashing back. Sarah was already up, puttering around in the kitchen. The smell of coffee wafted through the apartment, and despite everything, my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since the anniversary dinner that never was. Morning, Em, Sarah said softly, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs. How are you feeling? I sat up slowly, wincing at the movement. Like my whole world has fallen apart, I replied, trying for a wry smile but probably failing miserably. Sarah handed me a mug and sat down next to me. I called the hospital and told them you're sick, she said. You don't need to worry about work for a few days. I nodded gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Thanks, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you. We sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping our coffee. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. What was I going to do now? Where would I go? The idea of returning to the house I shared with Daniel made me feel physically ill. As if reading my thoughts, Sarah spoke up. You know you can stay here as long as you need, right? We'll figure this out together. I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. I just can't believe this is happening, I whispered. How did everything go so wrong so quickly? Sarah put an arm around me, careful not to hurt me. It's not your fault, Em. Remember that. Daniel, what he did is unforgivable. You didn't deserve any of this. I nodded, trying to believe her words. But a small part of me still wondered if there was something I could have done differently. If I had just been able to convince Daniel of my innocence somehow. My thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of my phone. I had turned it off last night, not wanting to deal with any calls or messages. But in the light of day, I knew I couldn't avoid reality forever. With a deep breath, I turned it on. Immediately, it started buzzing with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages, all from Daniel. I felt my heart rate pick up, a mix of fear and anger coursing through me. You don't have to deal with that right now, Sarah said, eyeing my phone warily. But I shook my head. No, I need to know what he's saying. With trembling fingers, I opened the first text message. Emily, please come home. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. Please give me a chance to explain. The next one, sent an hour later, I know what I did is unforgivable. But please, just call me. I'm worried about you. And another, Em, I messed up. I messed up so badly. Please, just let me know you're safe. I scrolled through message after message, each one more desperate than the last. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room. How dare he act concerned now, after what he'd done? But another part of me, a part one hated, still cared. Still wanted to know why. As I was debating whether to respond, the phone started buzzing in my hand. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, frozen. "You don't have to answer," Sarah said quietly. I knew she was right. I didn't owe Daniel anything. But I need to know why, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to understand how he could do this to me. Before I could change my mind, I hit the answer button. "Daniel," I said, my voice cold. "Emily." His voice was frantic, desperate. "Oh God, Em, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to reach you all night. Are you okay? Where are you?" I felt anger bubbling up inside me. "Am I okay?" I repeated incredulously. "No, Daniel, I'm not okay. You accused me of theft, you believed your mother over me, and then you hit me. So no, I'm not okay." There was a pause on the other end of the line, filled only by the sound of Daniel's ragged breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was choked with emotion. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But Emily, you have to listen to me. There's something you need to know." I closed my eyes, steeling myself. What could you possibly have to say that would make any of this okay? "It wasn't you," he blurted out. "It was her. It was my mom. She set you up." I felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "What?" I whispered. Daniel's words came out in a rush, as if he was afraid I'd hang up if he didn't get it all out quickly. "I confronted her after you left. I couldn't believe you would do something like that. And she broke down. Admitted everything." I listened in stunned silence as Daniel explained. Claire had indeed lost her credit card, but instead of searching for it, she had fabricated the entire story. She had made the purchases herself, using her backup card, at the store she knew I sometimes shopped at. "She hates you, Emily," Daniel admitted, his voice breaking. "She's hated you since the day we got married. She thought if she could make me doubt you, make me believe you were after our money, she thought she could drive us apart." I felt like I was going to be sick. All this time, all the polite smiles and backhanded compliments. Claire had been plotting against me from the very beginning. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why would she do this?" Daniel sighed heavily. "She never thought you were good enough for me. She wanted me to marry someone from her social circle, someone she approved of. When I chose you instead, she couldn't handle it." I sat there, trying to process this information. Part of me felt vindicated I had been telling the truth all along. But a larger part of me felt betrayed all over again. Because even if Claire had set the trap, Daniel had fallen for it. He had doubted me, had believed the worst of me so easily. "Emily," Daniel's voice broke through my thoughts. "Please, say something." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I don't know what to say, Daniel. Yes, your mother set me up. But you believed her. You didn't trust me. You hit me." "I know," he said, his voice filled with anguish. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I let my anger, my insecurities get the best of me. I should have trusted you, should have known you would never do something like that. I'm so sorry, Em." I could hear the genuine remorse in his voice, could almost see the pain etched on his face. But it didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase the memory of his fist connecting with my stomach, didn't erase the betrayal I had felt when he sided with his mother over me. "I need you to come home," Daniel pleaded. "We can work through this. I'll go to counseling, I'll do whatever it takes. Please, Emily. I love you." I closed my eyes, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. "I love you too, Daniel," I whispered. "But I don't think love is enough anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was thick with tears. "What are you saying?" I took a deep, shuddering breath. "I'm saying, I don't think I can come back. Not now. Maybe not ever. What happened, it broke something between us, Daniel. Something I'm not sure can be fixed. Emily, please," he begged. "Don't say that. We can fix this. I know we can. But I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. I need time, Daniel. I need to figure out who I am without you. Without us. There was another long pause. I could hear Daniel's ragged breathing, could almost feel his pain through the phone. Finally, he spoke. I understand, he said softly. I don't like it, but I understand. Just know that I'm here. If you ever want to talk, if you ever want to try again, I'll be here. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. After a moment, I managed to whisper, "Goodbye, Daniel." As I ended the call, I felt a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Relief that the truth had finally come out. Anger at Claire for her manipulations. Sadness for the love I had lost. And underneath it all, a tiny spark of hope. Because even though my world had been turned upside down, even though I had lost so much, I had also gained something invaluable, the truth about myself, about my strength. I looked up to find Sarah watching me, concern etched on her face. "What happened?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath, feeling oddly calm. "It's a long story," I said. "But I think I'm going to be okay." And as I sat there, surrounded by the warmth of Sarah's friendship and the knowledge that I had survived the worst night of my life, I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I would rediscover myself, heal from the wounds of the past, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to trust and love again. But for now, I had some healing to do. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Because I was stronger than I had ever known. I was a survivor. And this was my story to write. The days following Daniel's revelation were a blur of emotions. I felt like I was on a roller coaster, alternating between anger, relief, sadness, and a strange sense of vindication. Sarah, bless her, was my rock through it all. She listened patiently as I recounted Daniel's confession over and over, trying to make sense of it all. "I just can't believe Claire would go to such lengths," I said for what felt like the 100th time, pacing Sarah's living room. "I mean, I knew she didn't like me, but this is insane." Sarah nodded, her face a mixture of sympathy and barely concealed anger. "She's a piece of work, that's for sure," she said. "But what are you going to do now?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Part of me wanted to confront Claire, to look her in the eye and demand to know why she had tried to destroy my marriage. Another part of me never wanted to see her or Daniel again. As if sensing my indecision, Sarah spoke up again. "You know you don't have to decide anything right now, right? You've been through a trauma, Em. It's okay to take some time to process everything." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. But the truth was, I didn't know how much time I needed. How long would it take to get over the fact that my mother-in-law had systematically tried to ruin my life? How long would it take to forgive Daniel for doubting me, for choosing his mother over me, for hitting me? The memory of that moment still made me flinch. The look in Daniel's eyes, the sudden pain, the shock of finding myself on the floor. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my dark thoughts. It was a text from Daniel. "Em, I know you need space, and I respect that. But Mom wants to talk to you. She says she wants to apologize. You don't have to if you're not ready, but I thought you should know. I love you." I stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Claire wanted to apologize. Part of me was curious to hear what she had to say, but another part was terrified of facing her. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noticing my expression. I handed her my phone, letting her read the message. Her eyebrows shot up. "Wow," she said. "Are you going to do it?" I shrugged, feeling lost. "I don't know. Should I?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think," she said slowly, "that you should do whatever feels right to you. If you're not ready to face her, that's okay. But if you think hearing her out might help you move forward, well, that's okay too." I nodded, mulling over her words. The truth was, as much as the idea of seeing Claire again terrified me, I did want answers. I wanted to understand why she had done what she did. Maybe, just maybe, Hearing her explanation would help me make sense of this mess. Taking a deep breath, I typed out a reply to Daniel. Okay. I'll talk to her. But I want you there too. And we meet on neutral ground. Daniel's response came almost immediately. Thank you, Em. How about the cafe on Main Street? Tomorrow at 2? I agreed, then put my phone down, my heart racing. I'm meeting them tomorrow, I told Sarah, my voice shaky. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Do you want me to come with you? I can wait outside if you want. I felt a rush of gratitude for my friend. Would you? I'd feel better knowing you're nearby. The next day, as Sarah and I approached the cafe, I felt like I might be sick. My palms were sweaty, and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Sarah gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before I went inside. I spotted them immediately. Daniel and Claire were sitting at a table in the corner, both looking as nervous as I felt. As I approached, Daniel stood up, his face a mixture of hope and apprehension. Emily, he said softly. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. I sat down across from them, my back straight, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Claire looked different. Her usual perfectly coiffed appearance was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Emily, I don't even know where to begin. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. How about the truth? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Why did you do it, Claire? Why did you try to destroy my marriage? Claire flinched at my words, tears welling up in her eyes. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I thought I was protecting Daniel. I convinced myself that you were after our money, that you didn't really love him. I was so sure I was right that I lost sight of everything else. I listened in stunned silence as Claire poured out her story. How she had always dreamed of Daniel marrying someone from their social circle. How she had been convinced that I wasn't good enough for him. How her fear and prejudice had twisted into this elaborate scheme to drive us apart. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice breaking. I just wanted to plant a seed of doubt. I never imagined that Daniel would hit me. I finished for her, my voice cold. Claire's face crumpled, and Daniel let out a choked sound beside her. Emily, I'm so sorry, he said, reaching out as if to take my hand before thinking better of it. What I did, there's no excuse. I let my anger, my insecurities get the best of me. I should have trusted you. I should have known better. I looked at them both, these two people who had hurt me so deeply. I saw the regret in their eyes, heard the sincerity in their voices. But was it enough? Could anything ever be enough to make up for what they had done? I appreciate your apologies, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. But I don't know if I can forgive you. Either of you. Not yet, maybe not ever. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she whispered. What I did was unforgivable. But please know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes pleading. Emily, I know I don't deserve it, but please, give me a chance to make this right. To be the husband you deserve. I'll go to counseling, I'll cut ties with anyone who doesn't support our relationship, I'll do whatever it takes. I felt tears pricking at my own eyes. Despite everything, a small part of me still loved Daniel. Still remembered the good times, the laughter, the dreams we had shared. But could we ever move past this? Could I ever trust him again? I need time, I said finally. I can't just go back to how things were. I need to figure out who I am outside of our marriage. I need to heal. They both nodded, understanding in their eyes. As I stood to leave, Daniel spoke up one last time. I'll wait for you, Em. As long as it takes. I love you. I paused, my hand on the back of the chair. I love you too, Daniel, I said softly. But right now, that's not enough. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out. Claire's manipulations had been exposed. And while I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. Sarah was waiting for me outside, concern etched on her face. "How did it go?" she asked. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm sun on my face. It went okay," I said. "I got some answers. But I think I need to focus on myself for a while." Sarah nodded, linking her arm through mine. "Whatever you need, Em. I'm here for you." As we walked away from the cafe, away from Daniel and Claire and the mess they had made of my life, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be tough days when I missed Daniel so much it hurt, days when the anger threatened to consume me. But there would also be good days. Days of self-discovery, of healing, of rebuilding. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. And this time, I was the one holding the pen. The weeks following my confrontation with Daniel and Claire were a whirlwind of change. With Sarah's help, I found a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, just a studio with a tiny kitchenette and a view of the parking lot, but it was mine. A space untainted by memories of betrayal and pain. Moving out of the house I'd shared with Daniel was harder than I'd anticipated. Each item I packed was a reminder of the life we'd built together, the dreams we'd shared. I found myself tearing up over the most mundane things, a chipped mug from our first apartment, a throw pillow we'd bought on our honeymoon. But with each box I packed, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. Sarah was there every step of the way, helping me sort through the physical remnants of my marriage. "Keep, donate, or trash?" she'd ask, holding up each item. Sometimes the answer was easy. Other times, I'd find myself staring at an object for minutes, caught between memories and the need to move forward. "You don't have to get rid of everything, you know," Sarah said gently one afternoon as I hesitated over a photo album. "It's okay to keep some things, even if they remind you of him." I nodded, running my fingers over the album's cover. "I know. It feels like every happy memory is tainted now, you know?" Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "I know. But those happy moments were real, Em. What happened doesn't erase the good times you had." Her words stuck with me as I continued to pack. Yes, Daniel had hurt me deeply. Yes, Claire's actions had shattered my trust. But the love I'd shared with Daniel, the life we'd built together, that had been real too. I couldn't erase 2 years of marriage, nor did I want to. Those experiences, both good and bad, had shaped me into who I was now. As I settled into my new apartment, I found myself with something I hadn't had in a long time: space to think, to breathe, to figure out who I was outside of my relationship with Daniel. At first, the silence was deafening. I'd gotten so used to the rhythms of married life that being alone felt strange, almost wrong. But slowly, day by day, I began to rediscover myself. I picked up old hobbies I'd let fall by the wayside. I started reading again, losing myself in worlds far removed from my own troubles. I even took up running, pounding the pavement early each morning, letting the rhythm of my feet on the asphalt drown out the doubts and fears that still plagued me. Work became a refuge. I threw myself into my job at the hospital with renewed vigor. My colleagues noticed the change, commenting on my increased focus and dedication. If they noticed the shadows under my eyes or the way I sometimes zoned out during lunch breaks, they were kind enough not to mention it. One day, about a month after I'd moved out, my supervisor called me into her office. I went in feeling nervous, wondering if I'd made some mistake in my distracted state. "Emily," Dr. Patel said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've noticed some changes in you lately." I tensed, ready to defend myself, but Dr. Patel held up a hand. "Relax," she said with a small smile. "I'm not criticizing. In fact, I'm impressed. Your work has been exceptional these past few weeks. I have a proposition for you." She went on to explain that the hospital was starting a new community outreach program, providing healthcare education to underserved neighborhoods. "We need someone to spearhead the initiative," she said. "Someone passionate, dedicated, and empathetic. I think you'd be perfect for the role." I sat there, stunned. This was a huge opportunity, a chance to make a real difference. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Was I ready for such a big responsibility? Could I handle it with everything else going on in my life? As if reading my mind, Dr. Patel leaned forward. I know you've been going through some personal issues, Emily. You don't have to tell me the details, but I want you to know that I have complete faith in you. This could be a fresh start, a chance to channel your energy into something positive. I left her office with a lot to think about. That night, as I sat on my tiny balcony watching the sun set, I found myself at a crossroads. Taking on this new role would mean more responsibility, longer hours, less time to wallow in my pain and anger. But it would also mean a chance to grow, to challenge myself, to make a difference in people's lives. I thought about how far I'd come in just a month. From the broken woman sobbing on Sarah's couch to someone being offered a leadership role at work. I'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable, picked myself up, and started rebuilding my life. Maybe it was time to take another leap forward. The next day, I accepted Dr. Patel's offer. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Between setting up the new program and my regular duties at the hospital, I barely had time to think. But for the first time in a long time, I felt purposeful, driven. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but deeply rewarding. Seeing the impact we were making in the community gave me a sense of fulfillment I hadn't realized I was missing. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still nights when I'd wake up reaching for Daniel, only to remember he wasn't there. Days when a random memory would hit me out of nowhere, leaving me gasping for breath in the middle of a meeting. And don't even get me started on the first time I ran into Claire at the grocery store. I'd been standing in the produce section, debating between two types of apples, when I heard her voice. Emily. I froze, my heart pounding. Slowly, I turned to face her. Claire looked different. Smaller somehow, less intimidating than I remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually impeccable makeup slightly smudged. I didn't expect to see you here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to turn and run. Another part wanted to scream at her, to let out all the anger and pain I'd been holding inside. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "How are you, Claire?" She looked surprised at the question. I'm okay, she said hesitantly. Emily, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I am so sorry for what I did. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did such a terrible thing. I listened as she spoke, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was still anger there, still hurt. But there was also a sense of, not forgiveness, exactly, but something close to understanding. Claire's actions had been inexcusable, but I could see now that they came from a place of fear and insecurity, not pure malice. I appreciate your apology, Claire, I said finally. I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't know if I ever will be. But I hope you're getting the help you need. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand. Thank you for listening, Emily. And I hope you're doing okay. As I watched her walk away, I realized something. The sight of her no longer filled me with dread or anger. She was just a person, flawed, complicated, capable of both great love and terrible mistakes. Just like all of us. That night, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, I thought about how much had changed in just a few short months. I'd lost so much, my marriage, my home, my sense of security. But I'd gained things too. A deeper understanding of my own strength. A renewed sense of purpose. And a hard-earned wisdom about love, trust, and forgiveness. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe someday, Daniel and I would find our way back to each other. Maybe I'd meet someone new, someone who would love me without conditions or doubts. Or maybe I'd discover that I was complete on my own, that the love I had for myself was enough. Whatever happened, I knew one thing for certain. I was stronger now, more resilient. I had survived the worst and come out the other side. And whatever life threw at me next, I was ready to face it head on. As the stars came out overhead, I smiled to myself. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined for my story. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of an even better one.